You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us. Good evening. I'm Annie, coming to you from my haunted home just outside Salem, Massachusetts, America's favorite Halloween town.
And I'm Johanna, talking to you from our happily not haunted house in the Austrian countryside. And you're listening to Fresh Hell, your favorite international podcast, hosted by friends on different continents who have never met in real life.
Allegedly.
Allegedly friends or allegedly never met?
Never met. Wouldn't it be funny if this whole time you were just my neighbor?
We're completely scamming people. Every week we bring you a tale of murder, mystery, or macabre events in history. And if you're new to our show, welcome. This is our 5th October, or as we like to call it, Spooky Fuckery Month. And while we feature some paranormal episodes throughout the year, each October we focus on our favorite stories involving spooky fuckery. And of course, we end each October with a listener special episode where we share the stories that creeped you out. Don't forget, you have until the 20th to send those listener stories in and be entered into a drawing to win a fun Halloween prize.
That's right. Our email is freshhellpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll tell you more about that at the end of the show. Now it's time to get into this very special episode. Regular listeners, our Hellions, know how much we love trivia.
I don't think we only love trivia, like we love trivia.
Yeah, we love trivia. We're into trivia. We like a pub quiz. We like quiz shows. We pack our episodes with as much background info and as many fun facts as possible. And we know sometimes the facts that we find fun, y'all don't find fun. And that's okay. That's okay. But mostly you do. And more importantly, our very own Johanna is a 3-time Quizmaster champion in Austria. Have we talked? I feel it's like true. We have not talked enough about the fact that you are a television star in Austria. Like, move over, Arnold.
I don't think we have. I know we talked about it in the Facebook group, but I don't think I really haven't mentioned it that much on the podcast episode. That was 2 years ago, I think.
We should talk about it more.
Probably.
The way like Academy Award winners, they're always Academy Award winner, you know, Dustin Hoffman. You're always that. So now you're Quizmaster champion, Johanna.
And all I can tell you is that a lot of answers I had in this quiz show that made me 3-time Quizmaster were because of our fun podcast here and all the research and all the background info that we give to you. So there you go.
I believe it.
But Annie, did I ever tell you that I also went to audition for German Jeopardy like 25 years ago?
You did not. How was it?
Exhausting. There were a lot of very smart, intelligent, educated people, and I was just like 19 or 20, and I didn't make it, unfortunately.
It would have been fun if you had. I can't imagine having done it then. I feel like maybe now. I feel like I'm over 50% for knowing Final Jeopardy questions these days, so more of a chance than, but I still would never know. But Paul and I watch it religiously. We are huge fans of Jeopardy. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, let me give you a little bit of background on the game. Jeopardy is an American television game show that was created by Merv Griffin, and it debuted in 1964. The hook of the show is that it reverses the traditional question and answer format. Contestants are given general knowledge clues in the form of answers, and they then have to identify the person, place, thing, or idea that the clue describes, phrasing each response in the form of a question. So, to give you a real example from the show, Johanna, Norfolk Island has Bounty Day, honoring when descendants from the Bounty Mutiny moved to Norfolk from this island. And remember to answer in the form of a question.
What is Pitcairn Island?
Exactly, correct. I actually have an entire photo album of Jeopardy questions that you would know if you listen to the podcast. There's always one, I promise, in every episode. And the way Jeopardy works is there is a large board of computer screens set up as a grid. The questions are laid out, and in the first 2 rounds, there are 6 different categories. So 6 categories going across the top, And then down from each category, there are 5 clues below it. And the worth of the clues ranges from $100 to $500 in the first round, and then $200 to $1,000 in the second round, which is also known as Double Jeopardy. If a contestant guesses correctly, they add that amount to their score, and if they get it wrong, it's deducted. Also hidden in the first 2 rounds are so-called daily doubles. There's 1 in round 1, and there are 2 in Double Jeopardy. And they're just hidden randomly somewhere on that grid. If they find one that contains the daily double, they have to declare a wager before the clue is revealed from a minimum of $5 to a maximum of their entire score, which is what's known as a true daily double, or the highest clue value available in the round, whichever is greater. So if you found the daily double on your second question and you only have $100 or $200 in the bank, you could still bet up to $1,000, if that makes sense. Only the contestant who chooses the daily double is allowed to answer the clue, and they have to provide a response. A correct response, again, you earn that wager value to your score, and if you get it incorrectly, it will be deducted. In the third and final Jeopardy round, contestants get the topic before they make their wagers, but before they hear the question, just like in a daily double. The final Jeopardy topic could be anything from French authors, U.S. military history, world flags, Disney. Could be anything. Only contestants with a positive score will go to that third and final round. Fun fact, there are 5 banned wagers on the show. These include the obvious 69 and 666. In addition to those, also 1488 and 1488 are banned because of the neo-Nazi messaging. And I had to look this up because this really was fresh hell for me. My naive self had no idea, unfortunately, that 1488 was a thing, but it is very much a thing. We're not going to get into it because there are actually really strict laws in Johanna's country about even talking about this sort of thing for obvious reasons. And also, we don't want to dwell on white supremacy today. That's not what we're here for. But take a look and be prepared to be grossed out.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not that we can't talk about the things, but we can't promote it like on public forums, which a podcast basically is. So it's kind of like an iffy gray area here. So
even though we'd be trying to explain what to steer clear of, we don't want anyone to think that we're taking anything out of context. We're just not going to go there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So back to the show. There were a few different hosts before the late, great Alex Trebek revived the show, with the 40th anniversary of his debut show having just passed back on September 10th. So September 10th, 1984 was the debut with Alex. And I'm sad to say that the world lost the wonderful Alex Trebek to pancreatic cancer in November of 2020, aged 80, after a nearly 2-year battle during which he still hosted the show. Very publicly, very courageously. For over 36 years, Alex was a brilliant, witty, and sage host, and when he passed, one of the most winning contestants in Jeopardy history, Ken Jennings, along with other past winners and celebrities, rotated in hosting the show, and today it is now permanently hosted by Ken Jennings, and Paul and I think he does a great job. If you're the winner of a game of Jeopardy, you keep the cash that you won in that game, and you'll return the next game until somebody defeats you. If you win enough games, you're eligible to return to their special tournaments, where they compete against each other as the most winning contestants. And new host Ken Jennings would be one of these to return to face each other in Jeopardy's Masters tournaments. And it was in a Jeopardy Masters quarterfinal game, which aired Wednesday, May 8th, 2024, which inspired this entire episode, which is probably going to be over 3 parts. So if you have not yet watched the Jeopardy Masters quarterfinal game back in May, spoiler alerts. The contestants for this game were Jeopardy Amy, aka Amy Schneider, a writer from Oakland, California, and a woman after my own heart who loves pearls, and Downton Abbey, rest in peace Maggie Dame Smith, we've just lost her this past week. Amy won 40 straight games between November 2021 and January 2022. She won the 2022 Tournament of Champions, and she is the holder of the second longest winning streak and 4th largest cash winnings in regular play, with a total winnings of $1,634,800. The next contestant was Matt Amodio, a quantitative researcher from New York, who won 38 straight games between July and October of 2021. He is the holder of the third longest winning streak and third highest cash winnings in regular play. Matt's total winnings have been $1,529,601. Finally, we have Yogesh Raut. He is a cognitive behavioral scientist from Vancouver, Washington, who also has a podcast. And he went on to actually win this year's Jeopardy Tournament of Champions, taking home the $250,000 prize. So, we're watching the episode, and I was absolutely surprised and delighted to see one of the categories was ghosts. And so I turned to Paul and I said, I haven't really researched a good ghost story, I feel like, in forever. I'm going to suggest to Johanna that maybe we use this for an episode because look at all these great clues. So here we are with an in-depth look at the Jeopardy ghosts category. The first clue for $200 was, quote, this first lady to live in the White House is said to haunt the East Room where she once hung laundry. The correct answer? Abigail Adams. But to be honest, it's a little bit perplexing why she would be haunting the White House. For so many reasons. So let's get into it.
Well, we know there are a lot of White House ghosts, but hers seems to be exceptionally, I don't want to call her lame, but let's call her lame for the lack of a better word.
It's not very exciting, her ghost, is it? She's a laundry ghost.
Laundry ghost?
Yeah.
It's like these ghosts, they die while changing the sheets.
Trying to put on the duvet cover.
Stuck with
That's why. Yeah, no, yeah, all right. So there's a Washington Post article called, quote, Is the White House Haunted? A History of Spooked Presidents, Prime Ministers, and Pets. And in it, Teresa Vargas writes, quote, Abigail Adams was the first lady to live in the White House and used the East Room to dry sheets. Since her death, there have been reported sightings of her likeness in that area. She walks, according to the accounts, with her arms outstretched as if holding clean linens, end quote.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that also sounds like how zombie walks, just with the palms down, not up.
And that's it. Just a lot of shambling. And also, what if they were beginning to do the Macarena? Then they might be bums. They might be bums up. Yeah, laundry zombies makes more sense, I feel, than laundry ghosts. Also, the smell of lavender is scented in the East Wing, which is supposed to be the lavender of her laundry.
I love lavender laundry.
I love lavender. I absolutely love lavender. But given how old the White House is and how much has happened in there, I don't think you could count smelling lavender as necessarily being the ghost of someone doing laundry in that room.
Wouldn't they have just used like this kind of really strong soap that has no scent at all back then?
Well, probably, but not if you had living in the White House money. Then you probably had nice scented soaps with stuff like lavender, probably. I just don't think Abigail would bother haunting a home that she only lived in for 3 or 4 months. It wasn't even a home. It was a house. Especially because she hated it. She hated the White House. It was awful. Nothing was finished. But they had to make the move sooner than the house was ready because the capital of the United States had moved to Washington, D.C. So that's why they had to up and relocate. And we know that she hated it there because Abigail was such a prolific letter writer. And the Massachusetts Historical Society has in their possession around 1,000 letters belonging to Abigail. Many were to her husband, John. And about the new mansion, she wrote, quote, There is not a single apartment finished. We have not the least fence, yard, or other convenience outside. I use the great unfinished audience room as a drying room for hanging up the clothes, end quote. So that's the basis, I think, on everyone saying, well, it must be her, because apparently that's where she haunts. I don't know. Her husband, John Adams, the first vice president under George Washington and then the second president of the United States, hadn't been reelected. He lost to Thomas Jefferson. They were spoiled for choice back then, weren't they? So she had to upheave her whole life, move into the White House for just a few months before the Jeffersons moved in. It's not like they were staying there. She had to do all of this just for show. And I'm sure she was counting the days until she could get the hell out of there, We know that the first bathtubs in the White House were portable and made out of tin. There was no running water in the house, so water was hauled in buckets. Candles and oil lamps were used to heat the huge rooms, which were heated not all that well by log and coal fires. And then the stove for cooking in the kitchen was still just a giant open fireplace, you know?
Yeah, I remember you mentioned in the Garfield episode how rough the early White House was, and that was more than, 80 years after Abigail Adams used to live there. Wasn't it a swamp, I think?
Yep.
So do you think she just wouldn't want to go back?
I think for sure. Yeah. She wrote about how much she hated it, but also she was very clear. I do want to point this out, that she was very, very clear to her. She would hate that we're talking about her like this. She was very clear to her family and staff that she didn't want anyone to know her private feelings about how much she hated the White House, because she was worried that the American people would think that she was ungrateful and it would reflect badly upon the family, which I think all of us can understand that, right? Like, who hasn't been given a terrible birthday present by an aunt? So she was unhappy about that. But even more importantly, she really did not believe in slavery. She hated it. And she was very unhappy because there were still enslaved people working at the White House as servants and actually building the place. And it just made her very unhappy. Abigail was an accomplished, well-read, and witty woman, not unlike Lucretia Garfield. And she wanted slavery abolished. She was also a strong supporter of education, including education for girls, which was very much not the norm. So we're just going to talk a tiny bit about her because I hate the fact that she's sort of a laundry ghost, and she's more than a laundry ghost, even if she really is the laundry ghost, but I don't think so. So Abigail Smith was born in 1744, the second of 4 children, and she grew up in Weymouth, Massachusetts, which is located about 15 miles south of Boston. Google says you could walk from Weymouth to Boston in 5 hours or ride a bike in an hour and a half, and I feel like those are the numbers that are most useful to know when we're talking about travel in the 1700s, right?
I mean, there was no bike riding in 1700s.
No, I'm comparing a bike to a horse, I guess.
Yeah.
There's no way to check on Google, like, how long it would take you by horseback. If there was, that would be awesome. We would really use that feature a lot in our podcast. Her father, William Smith, was the minister of the First Congregational Church and a farmer, and her mother, Elizabeth, was a Quincy, a member of the Quincy family. So both of Abigail's parents were from very distinguished New England families. Her parents, the Smiths, were also slave owners, and we know they had at least 4 enslaved people, including Phoebe, who had raised Abigail and her siblings, and continued to work for the Smith family for wages. This had to have influenced Abigail's very strong abolitionist views. She was educated at home, which would have been the norm, and she was a bright child. When Abigail was 11, she and her sisters began lessons with a tutor from England by the name of Richard, who would one day marry her older sister. Richard had a good friend by the name of John Adams, who was a young lawyer. When John met 17-year-old Abigail, he was impressed by her brains, and not long after he proposed. But her parents were not sure that this young lawyer was really worthy of their daughter, and so they insisted on a much longer than usual engagement, just hoping that she'd grow out of it, move on to somebody better. Somebody better than John Adams.
Yeah, talk about underestimating your future son-in-law, I guess.
Right. So much better to underestimate than to overestimate and be disappointed, right? So they were married on October 24th, 1764. Oh, it's their 260th anniversary this month, when Abigail was 19 and John was 28. Like the Garfields, who hadn't been born yet, the Adams marriage was one of true love, friendship, and really unusual for that time, respect, mutual respect. John considered Abigail a trusted advisor at a time when most men would not have sought the advice of a woman. After they were married, they lived on John's small farm. 9 months after the wedding, their first child, Abigail Amelia Adams, named for Abigail's mother and who they called Nabby, was born in 1765. In 1767, a second child and first son, John Quincy Adams, was born. He would go on to become the 6th president of the United States. In 1768, another daughter, Susanna, who they called Suki, was born, but sadly died only a year later. Their second son, Charles, was born in 1770, but he would live only to the age of 30 when alcoholism had worn his body to death, devastating his parents. But he wasn't the only one of the Adams children to suffer from this disease. In 1772, their son Thomas was born, who had a more successful career in life before alcohol became a big problem in his later years. Sadly, in 1777, Abigail gave birth to a stillborn daughter they named Elizabeth. They started life on John's small farm, then moved into the city as his law practice grew. They moved around often as his job and growing political career necessitated. When he was away, and he was often away, she ran the farm, did the hiring and firing, handled the children's education, guided their finances through debt and inflation, and had a side hustle where John would bring back little trinkets from Europe and she'd resell them. And at that time, it was illegal for women to own or buy land, but it didn't stop her from doing it in John's name secretively while he was away. She purchased land in Braintree and in Vermont. She had very liberal ideas of a woman being able to own her own property. Wild. She is today most well known for her attempt, failed though it was at that time, to get women better educated. Now, when we say it was a different time, she wanted women and girls educated not because she thought women were equals, but rather because she made the point that women were the ones who would be educating the young boys and men who would then grow up to guide the country, right? So it was like children first learn at home, so mothers have to learn so they can teach their children. She's not wrong. It's all correct, but it wasn't a we're equals and we want to go to school too situation. She hated slavery, but had a lot of ideas that were still very racist and misogynistic. Yeah.
We see this over and over, and this is what we mean when we say it was different times. Yeah. It's not that we excuse things, but it's so important to look at it through the historical lens and in the historical context. And it's also important to not try to compare them to today's standards. And also very rarely, even today, there is black and there's white. There's always a lot of gray.
Exactly.
With everyone.
Yep. And people are complex, like you said, And Abigail is now best known, I think, for her March 1776 letter to John and the Continental Congress. While they were drawing up the Declaration of Independence, she wrote to her husband requesting that they, quote, "remember the ladies and be far more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation." End quote. Painful to say that almost 250 years later, this statement is still kind of true, and women are still fed up with a lack of equal rights and autonomy. There's a lot of information on Abigail and John out there, and if you'd like more information, I really encourage you to find it. It's just not relevant to today's topic. So, moving on. After they left the White House, they returned to the home that they loved in Quincy, Massachusetts. John ran the farm and wrote. Abigail remained an avid reader and letter writer and had a lengthy correspondence with Thomas Jefferson, among others. She was also a devoted wife, mother, and grandmother. Tragedy struck the family again in 1813 when their firstborn, Nabby, died of breast cancer. I'm going to talk about that briefly because it's terrible and sad, but it's also a fascinating glimpse into the way breast cancer was treated at this time. And I'm going to quote my old friend, the National Park Service here. Quote, "In 1809, Nabby discovered a lump in her breast. Although many aspects of medicine were less advanced than today, breast cancer was known as a dread disease. The cancer grew, and in 1811, Nabby's parents urged her to come to Boston for treatment. Her doctor, Benjamin Rush, recommended a mastectomy. Nabby was willing to go through with the procedure, but faced a barrier. Women at that time required their husband's permission for surgery, and her husband was in denial about her illness. However, she eventually convinced him the surgery was needed, and he approved her to go ahead with it. On October 8, 1811, Nabby underwent a mastectomy to treat her breast cancer. The surgeon was John Warren, the top surgeon in Boston at the time. John Warren was the brother of the late Joseph Warren, a prominent doctor and friend of the Adamses, who had inoculated Nabby for smallpox as a child. In the age before anesthesia or many modern surgical equipment, the surgery was a grueling and painful undertaking. Nabby survived her surgery and initially believed her cancer was cured. However, she continued to experience headaches and abdominal pain. Soon, it was clear to her and her doctors that her cancer had metastasized. In May of 1813, Nabby told her husband that she wanted to die in her father's house. William Smith made the arrangements for her to travel back to Massachusetts once more. Nabby died at Peacefield, which was the family home, on August 15th, 1813, 2 years after her surgery. End quote. Yeah, I think that's a story that many of us, if not everyone, can relate to in part. I know I'm not the only one with loved ones currently battling breast cancer, and it's one of the earliest accounts that I've seen talking about cutting-edge cancer treatment. A few days after Nabby's death, John Adams wrote to family friend Thomas Jefferson, quote, "Your friend, my only daughter, expired yesterday morning in the arms of her husband, her son, her daughter, her father and mother, her husband's 2 sisters, and 2 of her nieces in the 49th year of age, 46 of which she was the healthiest and firmest of us all, since which she has been a monument to suffering and to patience." End quote. So I just want to take a second and be grateful for how far we have come with treatment and, thank God, with anesthesia. And I'm sending extra strength and love out to all of our listeners and Hellions battling cancer of any kind, and especially to Rebecca and Terry, who are close to me and my family and are recently diagnosed and very much in the battle. Yeah, keep going, keep fighting. 5 years later, Abigail, now almost 74, became ill with typhoid. Did we discuss typhoid? I can't remember.
I'm sure we have discussed typhoid at one point, and Typhoid Mary is on our list still to cover, ever since watching The Nick, at least, I think. Just basic information on typhoid. It's caused by Salmonella bacteria in food or water or contact with an infected person. And the best way to treat is antibiotics, diligent hand washing with soap and water, and lab tests to ensure that the disease is no longer in your system. Because we know how many people had it and had no symptoms, like, as I said, infamous Typhoid Mary, and who just passed it on like wildfire.
Right. Today, a lot of people don't think of typhoid as a problem, but you could easily compare it to something like COVID or HPV, where people can be completely asymptomatic and pass it on. And those we're all familiar with. Yeah, with no lab testing or antibiotics, Abigail died on October 28, 1818, 3 days after their 54th wedding anniversary, with her husband by her side. Her last words were, quote, "Do not grieve, my friend, my dearest friend. I am ready to go, and John, it will not be long." End quote. I don't know how I feel about that last sentence. Like,
it's weird.
It's a little weird, right? Like, I'll be with you again soon.
Don't worry, it's not gonna be long. I don't know if I would tell my husband that.
Well, yeah, I find that last one very strange. It will not be long. Like, you're gonna be with me soon, so don't think anything fun's gonna happen. Was it just FOMO? I don't even know. And I don't know how long she thought it was going to be, but it was almost 8 years later. It wasn't that soon. It was another 8 years. And this is interesting. So her husband, the second president of the United States, John Adams, died on July 4th, 1826, of heart failure at the age of 90. Interestingly, Thomas Jefferson, third president of the United States and one of his BFFs, died on the same day. And they both died on the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams both died on July 4, 1826. Wild, right?
Crazy.
I know. And John Adams did live long enough to see his son, John Quincy Adams, become the 6th president. And speaking of presidential parents, Abigail was also just one of 2 women who were both the wife of and mother of a United States president. The second one being Barbara Bush. Yep.
I knew that one.
Nice. And she didn't live long enough to see her son become president, but he was a success and things were going just fine when she passed. So, yeah, that's the very brief history of the life and death of Abigail Adams. And she was, for her time, a revolutionary herself for being a woman interested in politics, believing in abolition, believing that women should be educated and allowed to own property, all very, very progressive ideas for her time.
So I have to say, if it is her, if she's the laundry ghost haunting the White House, then I'd say it has to be a residual haunting, like powered maybe by her unhappiness in this swamp, in this drafty new mansion built in a swamp.
It's gotta be, right? Would she even, this is the thing I keep going back to, is would she even have hung her own laundry? I don't think so.
Yeah, they were living on a farm before. I mean, she would do it with help, but I think these women still were very much hands-on.
They were. There is a painting of her overseeing the hanging of the laundry in the unfinished East Room, and she's watching a Black woman, possibly a slave, hang laundry. But it's a 20th century work from 1966 by Gordon Phillips. We'll post a picture of it. But I think the picture, this painting of her, holding one of her children and watching someone else hang the laundry, making sure it's done how she likes it, is probably more realistic than her actually over a washboard scrubbing. Poor Abigail. Jeopardy. I feel like we could have had a more exciting White House ghost. There were so many White House ghosts to choose from.
There's so many others, yeah.
Right? But that's number one, Abigail Adams. Yeah. Residual, I agree.
Yeah, right. Has to be. So our next clue, which was worth $400, was, quote, site of the first Academy Awards in 1929. This hotel boasts none other than Marilyn Monroe as a frequent ghost, end quote. Annie?
What is the Roosevelt Hotel in Hollywood, California?
Correct. So let's discuss it. Located at 7000 Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles, California, the iconic Spanish colonial revival-style Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel was financed by a group that included Louis B. Mayer, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and Sid Grauman. Grauman was heir to a theater building legacy and one of the owners of the famous Grauman's Chinese Theater, which was located just across the street from the Roosevelt, and maybe its own episode another day, I think, and it's apparently got a long list of a lot of spooky fuckery.
Yeah.
So, back to the Roosevelt Hotel, that's what we're here talking about today. It did cost $2.5 million to build, which today would be $43.9 million US dollars. The construction began in 1926 and it opened on 15th of May 1927. That's pretty fast, I say.
Yeah.
In 1929, it was the site of the very first Academy Awards, which was presented by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and hosted by President of the Academy, Douglas Fairbanks. All these names is like a who is who in Hollywood history.
Yes.
The event took place on 16th of May 1929 in the Blossom Ballroom, but it looked very different than the media extravaganza we have today. The first Academy Awards were a private dinner for 270 guests, and tickets did cost $5, which is $89 today considering inflation. That might not seem like a lot, but the actual ceremony only lasted 15 minutes, with the winners having been already announced 3 months before, so it wasn't that big of a deal back then. It is the only Academy Awards ceremony not broadcast on either radio or television. They did broadcast it on the radio the following year, though, for the second, with plenty of changes over the years. The hotel itself has seen many changes over the years, and like many grand old hotels, it was lucky to have also been restored. As for the hauntings in the hotel, the most famous is Marilyn Monroe, because Marilyn lived at the Roosevelt for 2 years early in her career, and the pool is where she did one of her first commercial Hollywood photo shoots by the diving board. I think most people who are very into Marilyn Monroe know exactly what photos we're talking about here.
She's gorgeous.
The diving board isn't there anymore, but in the 80s, British street artist David Hockney painted a mural on the bottom of the pool. And according to Don Jacinto, who is the managing director of the Hollywood Roosevelt, in a 2019 article for hotelbusiness.com, quote, I think our pool is truly amazing. It's lined with 250 palm trees surrounding the property to keep it private with large daybeds to lay on, making it a tranquil place to relax. This was the last pool mural artist David Hockney ever did, and it's valued $1 million. End quote. Legend has it that Mr. Hockney came to the Hollywood Roosevelt one beautiful morning in 1988 with a can of blue paint and a 6-inch paintbrush tied to a broom handle. And over the span of about 4 hours working at the bottom of the empty pool, he covered it with his signature circular brush strokes. Once the pool was refilled, the art seemingly came to life when the water was disturbed, weaving and dancing under the sunny Los Angeles sky. Now, as for the ghost of Marilyn, she's a mirror ghost, which are kind of scary, I think. The legend of the mirror is that when Marilyn was staying there in the 1950s, she had asked for a large, full-length mirror for her cabana room number 246. After her untimely death in 1962, the mirror was moved to the manager's office. It's also occasionally on display. And according to legend, in the winter of 1985, a maid was cleaning the mirror when she saw a blonde woman standing behind her. She turned to speak to the woman, but there was no one there. She turned back to continue cleaning the mirror, and the blonde woman was once again behind her.
Nope. No. I do not care for mirror ghosts. No, thank you.
They're scary. And I think that's also how the maid felt, and a legend was born. Now, interestingly, it doesn't seem the maid ever said it was Marilyn Monroe. Do we think there's a chance she wouldn't have known who she was?
So it seems impossible that somebody living in the 1980s in Hollywood wouldn't know who Marilyn Monroe was. That seems impossible, unless the woman haunting the mirror is just another blonde ghost screaming, "I'm not Marilyn," into the void, because that would suck. What if you were a ghost who everyone thought was Marilyn Monroe, but you weren't?
It's true.
Ugh. I read one thing saying that she met Arthur Miller in the Cinegrill nightclub at the hotel, but I have no idea if that's true. Do you know either way? I know you're a big Marilyn fan.
Yeah, I read that as well, and I'm not sure that's true either. I couldn't tell. All I know is that they were introduced by their common friend, the director, Elia Kazan. That's, I think, what happened. But where, it's possible they were introduced in a nightclub, or maybe they had their first date there. Who can say?
It could be. Also, I imagine celebrities like this probably, you might meet someone a handful of times at parties and events and things before you actually pay attention to where
it's true.
Met. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Also, Marilyn isn't the only celebrity haunting the Hollywood Hotel, though. The other big-time ghost is none other than her co-star from Misfits and personal friend, Montgomery Clift, who we have previously discussed in our Chateau Marmont episode.
Yeah, he was very handsome. A very, very handsome actor who had so much talent and charm and so many people who loved him. But he was gay at a time when it had to be hidden. I don't know how much we discussed him before and how painful his life was. I know we spoke of his really terrible car accident and his very close relationship with Elizabeth Taylor, right?
Yeah. I think his friendship with Elizabeth Taylor and her support because of his being homosexual is also what made her a gay icon in later years.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. I loved so many of his movies, and we also discussed A Place in the Sun, which is based on a case we covered, the murder of Grace Brown.
That's right.
Yeah, he was nominated for an Academy Award 4 times. He was an absolute brilliant actor. But Montgomery Clift was not a well man. He was battling a bunch of physical and mental health challenges from the after effects of the horrific accidents he survived, plus the chronic colitis caused by a case of amoebic dysentery that he caught on a trip to Mexico. Wasn't that also for the movie Suddenly Last Summer or something? I'm not sure.
Yes, I think so. Yep.
Also with Elizabeth Taylor. Such a good movie. He also had thyroid issues, which had started to affect his eyes, and he had been self-medicating his pain with booze and pills. And in 1961, he worked with Marilyn, as I said, on the film Misfits, a film written by Arthur Miller and directed by John Huston, starring Marilyn as a divorcee, Montgomery as a rodeo cowboy, and Clark Gable as an old-school cowboy. And it was a rough set. Monroe's marriage to Arthur Miller was falling apart and she was battling her own addiction during filming, and she described Montgomery Clift as, quote, the only person I know who is in even worse shape than I am, end quote.
Oh, that's a tough one. Misery loves company, right? It's just sad. It just makes me so sad.
It's so sad. I think they were both just very sensitive people. Very sensitive people.
I can understand that. And also, self-medicating, all kinds of pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think that, if I remember correctly, Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe didn't get along at all. At all. Now, Montgomery Clift's addiction was likely a contributing factor to his death, but he wasn't the first person on that project to die. Clark Gable died of a heart attack on 16th of November 1960 at the age of 59, shortly after filming ended, and before the film was actually released. Marilyn and Clift would see the film be a commercial flop, though today it's considered an excellent film and one of the best of the 1960s. I love the movie. It's just such a great movie. It's one that really shows how underrated she was as an actress. I love her so much, ever since I was 13 years old and watched Gentlemen Prefer Blondes for the very first time. And it's so heartbreaking to think about all the wonderful movies she still could have made. She was just an amazing actor with amazing comedic timing. Very
She
funny.
really was. Yeah. Oh, yeah, very
So
much.
smart.
She's hugely underrated as just a bombshell. She was amazing. And I know that the band, the Misfits, took their name from the film, but I have not seen that film in such a long time, I barely remember it. I feel like it's something my parents made me watch as a kid, and then I didn't want to watch it again, and really should.
I think it's a very tough movie to watch as a kid, because it has a lot of complex themes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like as a teenager, just
yeah, but still, I think that's it's a movie that you need some life experience to really get into, in my opinion.
I could understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Marilyn would die of an overdose in August of 1962, so a year after the film was released, and Montgomery Clift would do more films before his own untimely death on 22nd of July 1966. And his nurse and companion, Lorenzo James, saw that the Misfits would be on television that evening, and he asked him if he wanted to watch it, to which Clift responded, absolutely not. He went to have a bath and go to bed, and those were his last words. He died in the early morning hours of 23rd of July of a heart attack, and he was only 45 years old and definitely gone too soon, but apparently he's still hanging around the hotel. Monty stayed in room 928 when he was filming From Here to Eternity, and as a guest he was perhaps less than fondly remembered for playing the bugle on the 9th floor hallways or running lines while pacing as he practiced his role in the film.
That would be our luck, wouldn't it? If we it's like, oh, Johanna and Annie, we're getting together, we're traveling, we're going to LA, we're going to stay at this hotel, it's haunted, let's see if we see Marilyn. And what do we get? We get a 2 a.m. ghost bugle. I feel like that is very much
that's what
the sort of experience I would have somewhere. Yeah. No, there's no mirror ghost. There's nothing spooky, just ghost bugle all the time.
So today, people who stay in his old room experience the radio turning on or changing stations, or the channels on the TV changing. There have been more than one report of an apparition of Montgomery standing by the bed. The cleaning staff think he's the one responsible for the feeling of a cold spot brushing past them roughly on that floor. That's probably when he's pacing, studying his lines.
Yeah.
He's very much not alone here with Marilyn. The Blossom Ballroom, where the first Academy Awards were held, has an unexplained cold spot, and there are reports of ghostly lights moving around in there with no rational explanation. There's also a ghost in the kitchen, there's a piano playing ghost.
Or it could be a haunted piano. Who can say?
Yeah, who indeed?
Now, we should preface this by saying that a lot of this paranormal activity really kicked off during the renovations in the 1980s, which fits with the belief by those who believe in ghosts that changes in the place they haunt can cause increased paranormal activity. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so this particular story is from a Halloween 2004 article in the Denver Post about the Roosevelt entitled Hotel Has Glut of Ghosts by Will Kern. Kern writes, quote, Security Agent Campbell tells the story of a little one named Caroline. There was a man staying in a cabana with his young son and daughter. Apparently, he left to run an errand and left the kids asleep. The kids woke up and couldn't find their dad, so they decided to go play on their own. Caroline jumped in the pool. Her brother jumped in after her, and they both drowned. Caroline's ghost would become part of hotel legend several years later. Campbell continues. The operator got a call from a little girl using the house phone in the lobby. The little girl picked up the phone and said to the operator, "I'm looking for my daddy. I can't find my daddy." The operator said, "Well, if you wait right there, we'll send a security agent to come get you, and we'll figure out where your dad went." And she said, "Tell him to hurry up, because I want to play." And the operator said, "Okay, just wait right there and we'll send somebody." The security agent really wasn't that far away, but by the time he got to the lobby, there was no little girl on the phone. So he's thinking, great, now this kid's loose somewhere. He looked in the Blossom Ballroom, he looked in the lobby, he looked in the restaurant, and he was looking behind the bar when the girl called the operator back. The operator picked up the phone and the little girl said, "Did you find my daddy?" The operator said, "No, and can you stay in one place, please, because the security agent can't find you?" She said, "Well, I really want to play. Do you want to play?" And the operator said, "No, sweetie, I've got to go to work." The little girl said, "You're ugly," and hung up the phone. The operator got back on the radio and said to the security agent, "That little girl's on the phone again. Will you please get her and bring her to the front desk?" And the security agent said, "But that's impossible. There's no one on that phone. I'm standing right next to it." And that's when the operator... I do too. Got kind of freaked out, says Campbell. Many guests and staff members claim to have seen Caroline over the years. She wears a blue dress and frolics in the lobby. When approached, she disappears. Manny Frias, 45, an engineer with the hotel for 20 years, thinks he saw her brother. Late one evening, he saw a young boy playing in the jacuzzi. He turned his head away to look for the parents, but when he looked back, the boy was gone. He checked the area for wet footprints, but there were none. How could the boy have gotten out of the jacuzzi without leaving wet footprints? End quote.
Ghost kids are so scary. They scare me more than mirror ghosts.
So scary. Ghost kids are by far, I think, this scariest.
Because they're always tragic, but also mischievous, and then they sing like these nursery rhymes in a really creepy tone, and no, I don't like it.
No, I agree. Very scary.
It's important to mention here that we searched for details of this specific case and had no luck finding any mention of children drowning at the hotel. But we did find plenty of deaths, and I think that's natural in most hotels all over the world, especially if they're older ones.
Yeah.
Natural causes for the most part, plenty of heart attacks. Other more tragic circumstances have of course also taken place, like on 10th of January 1939, a man named Louis, a wealthy grain dealer who was staying at the hotel, had too much to drink in the cocktail bar and needed to be assisted back to his 8th floor room by a few members of the staff. They opened the window for some fresh air and left him tucked into bed. Sometime in the early morning hours of 11th of January, he either jumped or fell from the window in his room, and he died from the fall. When they opened his room, they found sheets tied together and tied to the bed with a sheet rope hanging out the window. Mary, his very distraught wife, sued the hotel for $75,000. And according to the Census Bureau, the median American family income was about $1,200 at the time.
Helps put it into perspective.
Yeah, so that was a lot of money. The lawsuit against the hotel and 3 employees claimed that they had locked him in the room and he had fallen to his death in a desperate attempt to escape. The bellhop testified at trial that the door did not automatically lock guests in and was working normally. The widow said that someone should have stayed with him to make sure he was okay, but the jury said in the end that the hotel was not to blame. And I get both sides here, but...
alcoholism is a terrible thing, but because you have to imagine that if he was a grown man with a thriving business and
also 1939, you wouldn't have taken it so seriously. Like nowadays, we know that we shouldn't leave intoxicated people all by themselves.
Right. But it's just also personal responsibility, right? Like how often do people get drunk to the point where multiple people have to get them back to their... Like if that's happening, you've got a problem, but it's just very sad. It's also the
Overall
tied up
very sad,
sheets
yeah.
is very, very sad. The whole thing is just, I can understand why she was upset because the tied up sheets thing. I mean, he must have been having some sort of alcoholic delusions because of how much
he probably couldn't
drink,
open the door and thought he was locked in. And
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which is so sad, but not the hotel's fault per se. The next death wasn't an accident. On November 3rd, 1953, a 42-year-old supervising teacher and former World War II nurse who had lived at the hotel for 11 years and room 332 died by suicide. She had been described as cheerful and very likable and was only recently clearly distraught. She took an elevator to the top floor, used the stairs to get to the roof, and then slid headfirst down a parapet, falling to her death. When police went to her room to investigate, they found a lot of blood and a razor. She had earlier attempted to cut both of her wrists, which were bandaged at the time of her death. It's just so sad.
I'm just wondering how she lived in the hotel for 11 years. I find these kind of things fascinating. I'm sorry.
A lot of people did. A lot of
yeah.
Especially if they were kind of like slightly society-ish. I think it was. Yeah. We're going to talk more about that next week when we talk about the Chelsea.
Yeah. And I think this is a great place to stop for today. But we want to leave you with some fun facts about the Roosevelt Hotel, which was named after US President Teddy Roosevelt, of course, or should I say the Hollywood Roosevelt, because there are so many hotels in the US and I guess all over the world named the Roosevelt.
Made searching the newspaper archives really fun, didn't it?
Yeah, I guess. There's also one in New York, as far as I remember.
Yeah. There's a really big one in Jacksonville that had a terrible fire at one point. Yeah.
In the lobby of the Hollywood Roosevelt, there are the original tiles still left and some are chipped. And some of these chipped tiles are attributed to Shirley Temple's tap dancing lessons with the great Bill Bojangles Robinson on the hotel's ornate tiled stairway as he helped her get ready for her role. Their performance in the 1935's The Little Colonel was the first interracial dance on screen. Just a fun fact. Also, that story, I love it. Errol Flynn is rumored to have made bathtub gin at the hotel's barbershop during Prohibition, and I can really picture that. There were apparently tunnels between the hotel and the Chinese theater, and celebrities could use them for secret rendezvous. Speaking of which, the hotel is also where Clark Gable and Carole Lombard carried out their affair, which is to me one of the most beautiful women in the history of movies. Carole Lombard, beautiful, gorgeous. A few other stars who have stayed at the hotel are Charlie Chaplin, H.G. Wells, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, Prince, and many, many, many others. Yeah, and I say next week we're back with the next clue in our Jeopardy Ghost Special.
So exciting. So much to talk about. So many ghosts. Do you have something good this week?
My something good this week. Did I talk about it last week already? No, I don't think so. So last Thursday, I had another official race, my second one, which was the Vienna Night Run, which is again around the Ring, the street that circles around the inner city in Vienna, which is 5.3 kilometers long, and the race was for 5K. And I went there and I thought, well, on my first 5K run for New Year's, it took me like 38 minutes something, so really, really slow. And I figured, well, my goal this time would be 35 minutes. And so I was running, and I was like, after 4 kilometers, I was like, oh my God, this is so exhausting. What's wrong with me? I can't. And then I finished the race. I checked my watch and I was at 32 minutes something. And my official time was 31 minutes and 50 seconds.
That's amazing. I'm so proud of you.
What's your something good?
I'm going to say that my something good this week, I know it's a little bit sad, but I'm very, very glad how far cancer treatments have come these days. I'm very grateful that it's not the death sentence it used to be, that people are living longer, happier. You know, it's not about quantity, it's quality too, isn't it? And I'm glad that so many of our loved ones are with us for longer and having a better quality of life. And I'm just hopeful for that to continue. We're very lucky. It can be easy to get caught up in and how difficult things can be and how annoying mammograms are or colonoscopies or pap smears or whatever it is that you need to go and have done. But it's just so important to do it. So this is just your reminder that, you know, we're very fortunate that we have these screening tools available. So if you've been putting off a mammogram, especially like check your records post-COVID, a lot of people are like, oh, shoot, I'm overdue for all this stuff. You know, I just had my annual colonoscopy scheduled for January. So yay. Yeah, don't put it off. Don't put it off. Just get everything checked and carry on. And if you are going through the battle of cancer of any kind, we just send you so much love and so much support. And that's it.
Absolutely.
If you liked this episode, then please. We haven't had a new review in like a month. It's been at least a month. I just need someone to write something nice about something, please.
Yeah, also you can leave comments under each Spotify episode or under our YouTube episodes. We also upload on YouTube. Please also subscribe on YouTube. That would be great.
Yes, subscribe on YouTube. That's a really easy way to listen to us while you're at the gym or whatever. My dad loves YouTube but can't understand how Apple Podcasts work. So, you know, you do you.
Please don't forget to send your listener story. You have until 20th of October. You're gonna be in the pool for the chance to win a Halloween giveaway if you send us your listener story at freshhellpodcast@gmail.com. And please don't forget to tell us how we should call you when we read your story. That would be super important. For everything else, go check out our webpage, freshhellpodcast.com. There you'll find links to everything, also to Patreon. We just had a super fun game night.
I missed it. My head. I was so sorry to miss it. We love our patrons.
It was just a trial run for our quiz. We're trying to set up a real Fresh Hell quiz with a lot of questions concerning our episodes. And I just had 2 of our patrons joined me to try it out. And then I had a lovely talk with Alex and Melissa. And Melissa and I talked a lot about the Menendez brothers case.
Oh.
And Annie and I talked about the Menendez brothers episode, well, the TV show by Ryan Murphy. And we also, you can listen to that on Patreon as well. I have a lot of thoughts about this whole case and the show.
Continuing, ongoing. Yeah, we'll be chatting about that more in Patreon. And thank you again to all of our patrons, because you're the reason that we break even and don't lose money on this show. And we're very grateful for that. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We wouldn't do it without you. We couldn't do it without you.
No, we couldn't. Not for this long.
No. Please tell your pets we said hi. The pets you currently own and your ghost pets that you probably have at home, I guess.
Mm-hmm. For sure. We know there's at least a ghost cat.
We had a ghost cat story last Halloween, right?
That's what I'm saying. We know we've got at least one ghost cat in the audience. So shout out to all the ghost pets.
Hug them, cuddle them, give them treats. Take them to the vet. Be kind to them. Be kind to your fellow human being. And the most important part of it all, be kind to yourself. And if you heard tippy taps in the background, that's Jem, and he's very annoyed with me because he wants a treat.
Oh, baby. Well, we'll say goodbye now then. And just remember that if you're going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
Bye. I love the tippy taps.
Could you hear him?
A tiny bit. There sounds like someone next to me is mowing their lawn all of a sudden, so you might have heard that as well. Yikes.